Thank you for your interest in DeployHub. My name is Tracy Ragan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DeployHub, and in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you how DeployHub empowers organizations to achieve business agility through a managed approach to microservices. You can say that microservices breaks the way we put software together. Only about 15% of companies report massive success with microservices. And that in part is due to the complexity that microservices create. And in fact, Randy Hefner from Forrester indicates that microservice development will fall apart without a coherent, disciplined, managed approach. With microservices, the concept of an application goes away. That is key to understand. And instead it's replaced by a grouping of these loosely coupled services that are connected via APIs at runtime. Microservices are pushed independently via your continuous delivery pipeline. So instead of managing a monolithic, you're managing a single function. So in other words, what we're doing is we're creating a dynamic application as opposed to a static one. And that dynamic application is based on smaller puzzle pieces. So if you think of what that looks like in your existing CD workflow, it sort of changes the way you manage a workflow. Developers don't create an application package through a compile step. Instead, independent microservices are pushed through their own workflow and independently deployed. The concept of an application goes away. So tracking the versions of the microservices and understanding what your application consuming creates the complexity. So what's lost in the microservice approach? Well, the application version schema goes away, and this impacts things like testing and bug tracking and even value stream. Things like something as simple as a bill of material report goes away. How is the application configured? What is it consuming? What's the difference between the last time we deployed it or what happened 5 minutes ago that changed the way our application is behaving? And an impact analysis. When should I release a new microservice? Who is it going to impact? So key to this is the ability to visualize the logical view of an application, something that you're going to hear more often. We're going to start talking about our application as it relates to in a logical view. It's because it's no longer a physical thing. DeployHub addresses this particular problem. It's a self-service SaaS solution for not only managing your logical application, but also sharing microservices based on a domain-driven design. DeployHub also does the actual release of your microservices and tracks them so that we can understand and display the differences of your application across many clusters. So think of DeployHub as sitting above the clusters and tracking these pieces even before you deploy. Let's take a look. So for the purpose of this demo, we are going to take a look at domains, applications, and components. We'll start at the domain. Domains are a way to organize your microservices into solution spaces. In this demo, in our fictitious company called the Online Store Company, we have 4 primary domains. 2 of them, the store service and the purchase processing, are what we call catalog domains. The store service has things like email, product, and recommendation services, while the purchase processing has services that relate to currency, checkout, cart, payment, and shipping. Now over here you also see that there is a project domain. That's the hipster store. And it has 3 subdomains, dev, test, and prod. Those relate back to environments and where things are deployed. Let's take a look at our hipster store project. If you look at the top level here, this is what we call a base version. Notice it doesn't have a number that increments it. And let's take a look at our base version. When you create a base version, you do this once, and you define it in a very similar way that you might in any release automation solution that allows you to package your application. Now, in this case, we can see that we have several microservices here, one that includes the cart service. The cart service has been pulled from the purchase processing domain, so it's outside of the hipster store. They're borrowing somebody else's microservice. Now, you also see there's a new version, but they're using the original one, this base version is using the GC6. Now let's go back and take a look at what happened. We have a new version of our Hipster Store 4th of July sale. And if we drive down into that, let's see why. What created this new version? Well, what created this new version is a change to our cart service. Now we have a GAF version of our cart service that this version of the application consumes. This on the right side shows you your full bill of material report or your dependencies that your application is consuming. So let's take a look at what happened to the component that created a new version of our Hipster Store. Let's drive down into the cart service. The cart service is a pretty important piece of the overall puzzle for our fictitious online store, and in fact it impacts 5 different applications. So we understand from a developer, microservice developer, that when we do implement a new version of the cart service, we're going to impact those 5 application teams. We may want to notify them that a new version's on the way. Now what happened? What occurred? We can see that the cart service was updated via a Circle CI pipeline, build number 179. It was registered with Quay. We can pull the digest, the tag, and the git commit. And that's what makes this particular cart service unique. In fact, you can see that we use part of the tag to version the new version of the microservice. We can also see where it's been deployed. Now this is a simple example, but you can imagine if you have multiple microservices being pushed to multiple clusters, each version of the microservice being independent. They're immutable. So this allows you to see where they've been deployed and how they got there. So the results of a DeployHub implementation first starts with taking the guesswork out of tracking who's consuming microservices and what your application configuration looks like. According to our customers, we're saving them about 3 to 6 hours of manual tracking work per team each week. Secondly, microservice sharing can really reduce redundant coding. The last thing you want to do with microservices is to have every team write a login routine. By having a centralized catalog that allows you to share microservices, you can reduce redundant coding by up to 50%. Now, deploying confidently is a common problem that I hear from SREs. Flying blind can be difficult when you're about to deploy a new microservice and you're not quite sure what the impact's going to be. So before you find an incident and have to track why your microservice broke something, DeployHub gives you some visibility and understanding how that microservice is going to impact where you're deploying it to. So we provide that data, the data to make the data-driven decisions that your SREs need to not fly blind. Another common question I get is, where does DeployHub fit in the ecosystem, in the continuous delivery ecosystem? Well, if we look at what a microservice ecosystem looks like, we start pretty much the same as any monolithic. You can start with a change request. That change request is going to impact not an application, but a particular microservice. That code is fixed, you get a code complete status, and you update and create a new container that contains your microservice. At that point, we now have a release candidate, and that's when DeployHub kicks in. DeployHub then determines who has been impacted by that new container, that new microservice, increments the application version, provides those BOM reports, the diff reports, and the impact analysis reports. It pulls the SHA, the git commit, and the CR. So once you deploy it, it starts tracking what's in the clusters. So you may have several clusters in your dev test environments. We're going to track what version of an application's in a cluster and what versions of the microservices are in those clusters. And that's the same with production. So keep in mind that we are tracking this information even before it gets deployed. We have the configuration data that will determine how any cluster will be impacted so that you don't have to rely on an incident report to know that something went wrong. Thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit about DeployHub and how we're making your microservice journey easier. I'm always interested in speaking to individuals who are working in the microservices environment. So if you're interested in chatting, you can find my calendar at deployhub.com. Also, remember, DeployHub is based on the Ortelius core. Ortelius is our open source project. Abraham Ortelius was the first map maker, so we found it to be a fitting name. Please visit us at ortelius.io or deployhub.com for more information.